Yeah, I know, Barrister Ghana, you should be able to react to that. But Dr. Munga, in one of the government forums, is saying we should be careful not to count our eggs too early. Well, that is actually in contravention of what the president was briefing the Constituent Assembly or the APP yesterday. The president's expectations are high. And I would say there is a reason for that expectation because of what the same person did during his 4 years tenure. Now, you've listened to um, the brief historical resume there from Dr. Lobati, Barrister Ghana. You understand some dynamics in politics and law, in fact, very greatly, not some. Do you think that this relationship between these two world superpowers, that's France and America and their councils and everything that we know is happening in high offices, can it stop a determined leadership of the United States to make act or to take actions that can change dynamics in sub-regional conflicts like the one in Ambazonia or between the Cameroons?
My answer to that question is absolutely yes. But let me reflect on what Dr. Lobati said. And Dr. Lobati, thank you very much for that very rich history of the political and historical intercourse between the United States and France, and between England, the United States, and France. Thanks for giving us a good a reflection on what transpired in France between, say, 1749 until Napoleon came to power in 1899. And a lot that you've said is pretty true. France was very instrumental in supporting the revolutionaries in the United States when they were fighting against England, and contributed to the liberation of the United States. And so, yes, the United States owes a historical debt of honor to France. And if you look within that same time, when the United States was angling towards its independence, you can see another national player that played a key role towards the United States' declaration of independence and being accepted amongst the family of nations in the world. Morocco was one of the first countries to recognize the United States as an independent state, and you've also seen that historical relationship between the United States and Morocco sustain itself for a period of over 2 centuries. Uh, but one thing that we know about the United States, and again, Dr. Lobati sprinkled some nice civics and his historical ingredients in there by talking about the Council of Foreign Relations. And what is the Council of Foreign Relations? The Council of Foreign Relations is just a body in the United States, and this Council of Foreign Relations was formed after World War I to sort of plan, strategize, and, and guide the implementation of both domestic and foreign policy here, and so to prevent the outbreak of any global war like we saw that broke out in World War I. But they still had the outbreak of World War II, and the powers that be realized that the Council of Foreign Relations was not sufficient in its formation, and so they went forth again at that time after World War II to form what they call the Trilateral Commission. And the Trilateral Commission consists of individuals, not just from the United States, but from all the other major Western nations, France, Britain, England, Germany, Canada, Spain, and I think Japan is also part of that mix, mostly the G7 plus. So we have these groupings. We have the Council of Foreign Relations, which is mostly just a domestic group in the United States. It's made up of influential academicians, politicians, journalists, scientists, and we are really talking about the who of who's of the United States political nomenclature. So, but one thing that we also know is that one of the reasons that Trump is resisted so much by the governing class of the United States is that Trump doesn't come from the Council of Foreign Relations. And usually, when they see somebody who is influential and who could be a plus with the Council of Foreign Relations, that person is co opted into the Council of Foreign Relations to now become a contributory part of that policy making strategy. To the best of our knowledge, Trump did not come from that. And so there's so that resistance of him. You can see the Bush wing of the Republican Party there in stark resistance to who Trump is. But that history apart, let me apply it to how I see it potentially applying to Ambazonia. For us to be able to lobby and get the United States or a leader in the United States to exert actions that can be consequential for positively or consequential positively in the outcome we desire in Ambazonia, which is the restoration of our sovereignty. We have to have a consequential leader that is willing to usurp that handshake between America and Europe in having France or Germany or England do whatever it wants to do on the African continent based on its interests. So we have to have a leader in the United States who has that spine and who is enough of a consequential leader who can usurp that relationship. And of all the leaders you know since this Ambazonia conflict started, who is the one with the most consequential spine that can usurp that relationship between the United States and Europe? You got it right. Maximus Donald Trump is that consequential leader. And it's always, historically, there are incidents where the American leader has trumped or has usurped that sort of handshake relationship between the United States and Europe. We saw in the case of the Suez Canal, I think that was 1956, correct me if I'm wrong, when both Britain and France, who owned the Suez Canal, were had their ships deployed, and when Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal in Egypt, France and England were going to go attack Gamal Nasser and seize the Suez Canal. But it took a U.S. president at that time who was consequential and who had a tough spine to call the English and the French and gave them a marching order for them to turn their ships around the Mediterranean back and informing them that truly the Canal was sovereign Egyptian territory and they had no right to attack Egypt to seize that property. And the British and the French turned around in the Mediterranean and put their tails between their legs. So, and there are a lot of other historical precedents that we can factor in. But in the case of Trump, it is not just wishful thinking. And I heard you read that comment from Dr. Mungwa that we should not count our chickens before they hatch. Very true, Dr. Mungwa, for you to say that. But one thing that we have to realize is that given Trump's worldview, and Trump has a very I've really studied Trump for a long time. A lot of people do not understand why Trump does some of the things he does. People don't understand why he's so close to Putin. Trump has a very wide view of the world. Trump has a very wide view of the world. And the conflict in Ambazonia is sort of undercutting that his wide view in the world. As Barrister Fulso rightly say, and Trump has voiced it, he says they are poisoning our bloodline. There is constitutional legal foundation for Ambazonians to seek asylum in the United States. Again, buttressed and backed by TPS. And yes, Trump can say, I'm going to deport people willy nilly, but the United States has also something they call the court system. And there's a bar you have to meet to overcome a certain presumption before you deport somebody who is an asylum seeker here. And when you have TPS legally, and TPS is really an act from Congress, TPS legally establishes the foundation upon which asylees from that specific country or territory can seek asylum. So the only way to overcome TPS and do what is in Trump's worldview and in Trump's interest is to help resolve that situation that is giving ground to TPS. So I think we are not really counting our chicks before they hatch. I think we are looking at what has happened. As Dr. Lobati says, he doesn't assess the United States based on what he thinks the person is going to do. He assesses that president or that administration based on after those 4 years. But we already have
what
four
the
years of that we can use as a guiding lens to know what is going to happen. And it is not only dependent on what the Trump administration is going to do. We as Ambazonians have to rally ourselves, have to organize ourselves, have to reach out to the State Department because the diplomats that are going to be appointed, the ambassador to Cameroon, the assistant secretary of state to Africa, the United States representative to the UN, these are all going to have a very hawkish view towards Africa and a hawkish view against Yaoundé. And so, but we have to be willing to act to leverage that. I know just before COVID, which was when Trump was outgoing, Pa Augustin Dangam and I, in one of his outings, we were invited to the State Department and we did a very beautiful present, and that was under the Trump administration. We did a very beautiful presentation about what was ongoing, and the follow-up was supposed to be us going to the UN and actually doing a presentation regarding how Ambazonia is being deprived of its right and its sovereignty. And what preempted that from happening or forestalled that from happening was COVID. COVID made it so difficult for people to meet one on one. So, based on Trump's 4 years and based on what we know is of Trump's worldview, we can, of course, with caution, predict what is going to happen, but not only leave it to a certain prediction, but be able to act in Ambazonia's interest, being able to take that initiative to influence U.S. policy towards Ambazonia and guide it towards the resolution or the obtaining of Ambazonia's sovereignty. So, thank you. Again, I'm going to leave my analysis of why Trump was elected to when we come to that segment of the show.